Hey, peace, my people, peace, my people, peace, my people. You know, earlier today, I was invited to a live. I joined a live earlier today. And, you know, sometimes you join and you learn something, you know. I learned that we still have to tell our stories even more. There's still a lot of work that still needs to be done. There's still so much more work that needs to be done. Today, I want to talk about our beliefs, our indigenous beliefs, you know, and how today most people have lost sight of what those beliefs were and how they came about. I mentioned a story earlier about the vulture and the jackal. And the vulture and the jackal, in the wild, our ancestors have appreciated how when the jackal is hunting, which is quite clear in the name of the jackal, ingqawuse or nqilashe. When the jackal is hunting, thank you, brother Making. When it hunts, it makes a sharp noise, a sharp noise, signaling for the vulture to come. When the vulture comes, the jackal knows that wherever the vulture eats, the jackal is going to eat as well. And these are very important symbols because these symbols are to be seen in other parts of ancient Africa as well. If you look at this picture, you see a big jackal there at the top called Sekhmet. Sekhmet is a massive jackal which was deified. It became a deity. Not a jackal, sorry, a vulture at the top. And you see the jackal or the canine. Well, some people may view it as a wild dog. Either way, you see this canine or jackal-like creature called Anub. The one at the top is Sekhmet. The one at the bottom is called Anub. Togoz and Abezit. And I want us today to have a look at these things because if we say we are the ancient people, somehow there's no way that we did not come up with some of these concepts. In ancient times, there was certain beliefs, and these beliefs had a lot to do with the personification of natural elements. Thank you, Ndabezit. So natural things would be personified, which means they would be given human attributes. Something as simple as the healing practice would be given a human attribute. So it stops being just the healing practice. It becomes a humanified or a personified being who's called healing. And this is a very important thing because some of the ancient beliefs are centered around this, the personification of nature. But not just nature, of other natural elements, you know. It could be a practice, it could be a tradition, the personification of things. It has a massive part in how we built our beliefs. For example, healing itself, we personified it as ubuqi. And you would find that in ancient times, Gri would be treated as an individual entity that had a mind, that had attributes. But these are not real physical attributes. These are attributes that have to do with the healing practice. So some of the mythologies that we are told about, you realize that cows are talking, birds can talk. At a deeper level, it's not necessarily an actual cow or an actual bird. I'll tell about one story that I was told by my mother when I was growing up. My mother told us about a cow called Dulub. Dulub was a bull. Dulub was this bull that used to save people from death It used to save people from destruction. But Dulub had an enemy. This enemy was called Gongo. In fact, there was a song in this story where Dulub now is trying to save this human. But then the Gongo is so strong and trying to catch both of them and destroy them. No, there was a song that came out of that. Itingoma. Dulube, Dulube, Kaubaleke, Dulube, Amagongongo, Dulube, Azosbulala, Dulube. Dulube run, because these Gongongo are gonna kill us. For the simple mind, for the naive mind, it's just a story that's supposed to scare children. But if you go to the name Gongongo, you will realize that it's not just monster. Gongongo literally means the one who brings you deep into the hole. The one who causes you to plunge into the bottomless pit. Literally. Igongongo, it's literally the one who plunges into the hole. Because ukuti gongo is to fall deep into a hole. When there's a hole that has been dug, to fall into that hole, you say gongo. Now, when we reduplicate the last syllable, we say gongo. It's an emphatic form to say deep into the hole. That's what the name gongo means. So it's not just some monster that is there chasing the cow. No. It is a monster that plunges you deep into the hole. Think about it. It is symbolic of death itself. Gongongo is symbolic of death. This is the god of death in essence. Now, when these stories are preserved, they are preserved so that they are understandable to children. It's Gongongo, the deity of death, or the personification of death. Dulube, on the other hand, takes the form of a bull. Now, what is a bull? A bull is a cow, a male, that symbolizes virility, that symbolizes fertility, that symbolizes strength. That's why even the pharaohs in ancient times used to wear the tail of the bull on their backs. That's why the sangomas or magricha use the tail of the bull in their amachoba. This is why even kings and people who represent the royal power and authority use the tail of a bull, because a bull symbolizes continuity, virility, fertility, and power and authority, the opposite of death. So Dulube on one hand is life, the life force. Gongongo on the other hand is the one who plunges into the bottomless pit, literally the underworld. That's what the Gongongo represents. So when our parents were singing for us as children, City, Dulube, Dulube, Kaubaleke, Dulube, Amagongongo, Dulube, Azosbulala, Dulube. Hey! You can imagine now this bull running and the Gongongo are coming. But in reality, Dulube and then Gongongo. Gongongo is to plunge into a pit, a deep hole. Now let's go back. Let's go and hear what the Nama people, what the Kwek speaking people say. Do they have a similar story? The Kwek people are going to tell you about Harib. Harib or Harib. Harib is exactly the same as Gongongo in isiXhosa. Harib means the exact same thing as Gongongo in isiXhosa. When you say Gongongo, you're saying deep into the hole. When you say Harib or Harib, you are saying to plunge into the hole. So Harib in the mythology of the Nama and the Kwek speaking communities, including the Damara, those who still remember these mythologies, is the exact same thing as the Xhosa mythology. Udulube namagongongo. In this case, it's Haiteb and Harib. Haiteb, the name. It's crazy because Haiteb is also a bull. Haiteb is a cow, by the way. Just like Dulube. The Nama people, the Kwek speaking communities, they specify that Haiteb is in fact a hero that is there to save people. Haiteb is the hero that's there to save people. What does Haiteb mean? The name Haiteb. It's Hai and Tseb. Hai means a tree. It's a softened form of Chai. Chai for a tree. So it's Haiteb actually. Oh, Haiteb. Which means Usomti. The one who's always by the trees. The reason why this bull was called Haitsep, or the one who's always by the trees, or the tree one, is because this bull in mythology is understood as having been this character that used to make nice music, hiding behind bushes. So Haitsep means then the bush one, or the one of the bushes. It's a bull. It is a bull that used to make music, nice music about trees, and about natural things. So that's where the name Haitsep comes about. It's Hai for a tree. Tsep is a suffix like ushe. When you say upunga she, so tondo she, ugambu she. So it's tsep in Kwekwe languages. It's Haitsep. It's umtise. Ngokwesinguni, umtise, usomithi, the one who's always by the tree. So Haitsep is actually a nickname of this bull, which we call Dulub. This bull is a representation of the life force. I'm going to how the names Tiko came about. Go walk with me here. Haitsep now has to. In this mythology, there's this spirit that is a trickster. It's an entity that is there to trick people into death. The ancient story goes as in, when this spirit is tricking people, it tricks them to throw a stone at him. But he sits at the edge of a deep hole. So when people throw a stone at this spirit, the stone bounces back, hits the people, and they plunge into the hole. Hence the name Harib or Gong, because Uguti Gong is to get deep into the hole. So it's basically a tricking entity that tricks you into death, similar to what Satan is supposed to be, because the name Satan itself is Hashatan, which means the opposing one. So now the story goes like Udulube or Haitsep went and faced this creature in ancient times. In these times, animals could still speak. Thank you. Animals could still speak. Natural elements had human features. So, Haitsep or Usomiti, aka Dulube, the bull, the life force represented by the bull, went to challenge the death force represented by Udulube. No, represented by Amagongong or Karib. So these are two representations of life and death in stories which are told to children. Now, Dulube or Haitsep has to go and fight now Karib, the one who plunges into the deep hole. Now there will be different accounts, but ultimately at the end, Haitsep fights the monster that tempts people into death, into the deep hole. Fights that monster, kills that monster. And that's how then the story goes about. Haitsep kills the monster, Igongong dies, right? Now Haitsep becomes this hero in our history. He becomes known as the bull, Inkunzi. Just like we call our kings today, Inkunzi. Inkunzi Ehlabezinye. I know Inkosi Umswati. Is called Inkunzi Ehlabezinye. Mswati lo mnyama kulabalo nutfuli. Ulodvunganzaba. There's a song that they used to sing for him emhlangeni. Bathi Inkunzi enjani ehlabezinye. Inkunzi enjani. Oh, so Inkunzi then, when you hear these stories of children about bulls, do not ever think it's an actual cow. Trust me, it's a bigger thing. That's why they told it in a story. So now Haitsep or Dulube, this entity so Haitsep is represented by a bull. He goes to defeat the trickster or the one who tricks people, Harib or Gongong, who tricks people to go into the hole, the deep hole. Now the deep hole represents the underworld. It represents the dwelling of the dead. So Harib or Ugongong is there to trick people into death, which in ancient times, our ancestors tell us, in the most remote past, people could resurrect. People could be brought back to life. That's how advanced the Gri was. The Gri is the magic or the healing practice Hence, Xhosa people use the word ubugqirha. He is the magic or the healing spirit. It was so advanced that people could be brought back to life. Now, Dulube or Haitseb, the one who's always by the bushes, or who always sings about the bushes, the bull, defeats Harib Gongo. Dulube becomes famous. In fact, there's a story that I'm going to tell you about. It may sound weird, but this story recounts back into when Dulube was leading his people. But then they had to cross now. They had to cross a body of water. Dulube cried out to the grandfather of his grandfather to open the waters, and the waters opened. They cried out to Gamap. Gamap means the one of the water. Gama means water, amans. So they cried out to Gamap to split the waters in half, and the waters were split in half. I know that sounds very similar to another story. So Haitseb then was this ancient leader, basically. Think about the whole story of Emhlangeni. When we talk about Emhlangeni, think about there was a leader who led us, Emhlangeni. Kup Emhlangeni is where there's water, in the water bodies. So when we talk about Emhlangeni, we talk about an ancient story of crossing into water bodies. That's what Emhlangeni is in reference to. This is what we see in the story of Haitseb, who is the great bull who defeated Gharib, who's Ukongong, who's the one who tempts people into the bottomless pit. But Haitseb ended up dying. And the ancient story goes as in the way Haitseb was buried, they built a heap of stones for his grave. The grave of Haitseb was signified by a heap of stones. And this heap of stones we know today as Isivivane. We know this heap of stones as Isivivane. I don't know what it's called in Sesotho and Tswana languages. But this heap of stones was the grave of the great leader, Haitseb. It was stones of remembrance and stones of reverence. These stones in Namagoab are called Haitse Abib. Haitse Abib, which means the place where Haitseb is. Haitse for Haitseb, the one of the bush. Abib means on here. Haitseb on here, which means Haitseb ulapha. That is the name of these stones in Namagoab. In isiXhosa, these stones are called Isivivane and in isiZulu, from the word ukuviva, to destroy or to break into pieces. So Isivivane is the little broken pieces. But these stones are a remembrance. These stones are a place of reverence. This is why when you come across these stones, you render a request. You don't just pass these stones. You pick up a little piece of stone, you put on top, uthi sicela indlela. I'm asking for a good journey. Or if you have a bit of honey, you offer that honey as a libation on top of the stones. So these stones are reminiscent of the idea of an altar. Isivivane is a form of some altar, but also reminiscent of an ancient form of graves. Think about these stones as the most primordial form of a pyramid. I repeat, think about these stones as the most primordial form of a pyramid. To this day, in my culture, we don't have tombstones. We use stone heaps like this. These are our graves, the proper way to bury us. And it should not come as a shock that pharaohs in ancient times were buried underneath heaps of stones that today are called pyramids. Thank you, observer. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. It should not come as a shock that today you have pyramids and they keep on discovering bodies of ancient leaders underneath those pyramids, because the heap of stones is a representative of a grave of an ancient leader called Haitseb, who defeated Gharib. Gharib, the Xhosa call Ugongong, and the Xhosa call Haitseb Dulub, which was represented as a bull. The same bull that our people take the tail of that bull, they use it in Ichobo. That's why Sangomas use the tail of the bull for authority. That's why pharaohs used to wear the tail of the bull on their back for authority. That's why Imbongi used the tail of the bull for authority because the bull was a representation of power, virility, continuity. That is the bull. The one who represents power, virility, and continuity. And so you get a heap of stones now, which is the most primordial form of what became pyramids to us. What became pyramids nowadays? The pyramids, besides the other functions they have, they also act as graves. They also act as graves. I don't want to get into how we bury, because that's another story on its own. Someone was asking, where do you get this mythology? Hey, you will get bits and pieces of it. Tina, we got it from our grandparents. Well, for me, I got it from my grandparents. From my parents, sorry. But you can search online the story of Tsuwi, which is what we call Tiko. Check the story of Haitseb. Write it as Haitseb. You will find it online. You will find maybe a paragraph on it. Check the story of Gaunab. So I just wanted to show in our oral history, in the mythology we have, you find evidence of the origins of these mythologies. You find evidence of the origins of these stories, of these practices that we have today. So today we build amadwala, we make izivivan, we make the Haitse Abib. These stone heaps that you see here, when kings have passed away, we put these things. When people have passed away, we put these things in remembrance of them. But the oral history, which is stored up in mythology, tells you that the ancient king called Haitseb, which is an alias. The word Haitseb is an alias to mean the one in the bush, or the one by the bush, or the one who likes to sing about the bush, as Haitseb was said to. Hai is a bush, Hai is a bush, Tai is a bush, Uluti is a bush. So Haitseb means the man of the bush. An ancient king. He went and defeated the one who puts people into the deep hole, which means the one who tempts people, the one who lures people into the underworld. What is the underworld? You ask me, what is the underworld? It's what people fear as hell today. Haitseb defeated the entity of the underworld. Haitseb, in our oral history, defeated Harib. Dulube defeated Igongongo. Haitseb defeated Harib. Dulube defeated Igongongo, which means the life force defeated death. For you to understand this story, you would need to read a European written book, I understand. And you would need to see something with horns that has a dark skin that's scaring people. Cake Sangara is asking, why did he lure people underground to the underworld? No, this is about death. Remember, when we bury people, we bury them underground. So the underworld is actually death in and of itself. Humans have always tried to create philosophies around death, to conquer death. It's been a human pursuit for the longest of times. We don't want to die. So they personified the very force of death itself. And this force of death obviously is going to be related to disease. This force of death is going to be related to accidents. This force of death is going to be related to war. That's why if you go to these mythologies, you will find that the god of war, of disease, the god of death, is a personified entity. So, Harib, as this entity that is tricking people, it's tricking people into plunging into the hole. It's literally behaviors that trick people into death. It's a representation of a physical reality or metaphysical reality. Now, Dulube, the bull, which is also called Haitseb, the bull, represents the opposite of death now. That one represents life. So it represents hope now. This is very important because the stories we are told as children are not just to make you sleep at night. It's a containment of your history. It is true, cold was a representation of death. In fact, winter itself, winter is a representation of death, which is the state of opposite of life. Just like the night, in some instances, is a representation of death. So they say the night is the death of the sun. Winter is the death of summer. Understand? So these are representations. They are symbolic of some metaphysical entity, of some metaphysical reality. Some reality in some way that is being represented. Thank you, observer. Thank you. So that is the first story I wanted to talk about. The story of Dulub and Gongo, or the story of Haitseb and Arib, which means the story of the king who was represented as a bull versus the entity that tricks people into the deep hole, into the underworld. And therefore, the oral mythology now that we read, the accounts in mythology tell us that when this king died, the same king who led people through the body of water and caused the water to split apart by calling onto Gamab. Gamab meaning the water entity, the water being, because Gama means water, Amakam. So Haitseb, after defeating this one, in another story, he was fighting with his enemies. He had to lead these people through the waters. He had to lead these people through the waters, and he had to call upon the water being, Gamab. Now, I've been talking about entities and representations of entities. In one of my lives, I spoke about things like Inkanyamba and Ikhanti. Khanti, you look at the word, it means the pale one in color, but it also means the water one. So, Haitseb calls on Gamab to split the waters in half. Gamab splits the waters in half. Haitseb goes through with these people. Think about Umhlanga. It's a water body that has reeds. Think about Umsi. It's the smoke. Think about Unkwenkwezi, some people, or Unyezi. If you go into our oral history, our people tell you about ancient ancestors, but all these ancient ancestors are natural things. Umhlanga is a natural thing. It's the reeds, the water body. Umsi or Musi, it's the smoke or vapor or moisture. You understand? Ulanga is literally the sun. If you go to the most ancient stories that our people tell you about, they will tell you about Umhlanga, Umsi, and Unyezi or Unyelezi. This is literally the reeds or water bodies. This is literally smoke, Umsi, or moisture, and this is literally the star or the night light. Now we must find a way to understand how these things were relevant to our ancient history, because if we are simple about them, we will think, oh no, Umhlanga is just a king that lived in the 1400s. No, there's a much older Umhlanga. That's why when people talk about Untu as if it's something that lived in the 1400s, Untu cannot have lived in the... Untu is a personification of the earth. When you say Untu, singabantu bakwantu, we are personifying the physical matter of which we are manifestation. We are literally a manifestation of literal physical matter. But we also find ways to feature other natural elements like water through elements like Unkanyamba. We try to feature other natural elements like thunder and rain and flood. And we personify. We have this history of personifying things through physically recognizable entities. Impundulu is a personified thunder. Intsikizi is a personified flood. You understand? All these things help us to personify natural elements. Natural elements. So that's the first story. The second story I wanted to touch on, and this is how then the oral mythology tells us is the origin of Isivivane, the heap of stones, which is called Aise Abib, or the dwelling of Abib. The dwelling of Haitse, sorry. Haitse being the ancient king or god who did all these great things. So now Isivivane, therefore, is a revered place. It's a place of prayer, actually. When our people were used to take long trips, whether it's a hunting expedition, They used to pass by his vivane, pick a small stone, put it there, say a small prayer. Say a small prayer and pass. Offer a bit of honey, offer a bit of milk, offer some meat and pass. It's a vivane. It's a Abib. The dwelling of Abib. Or the heap of small broken pieces. It's a vivan. Because uguviva is to shatter. The heap of shatterings. Now I want to talk about another one. The story of Tsikwab and Kaunab. Now bear with me here. Because some of these things is your first time hearing them. Kaunab. The word Kaunab means evil. Ububi. Ugungola. A representation of death, ukufa. That's what the word kauna means. So kaunab, when we put the suffix b at the end, it's the one of kauna. Yabo, it's like when we say or mu too. Mu, you are literally, it's a possessive prefix or possessive suffix. So kaunab is the entity that is a personification of utter evil and death. Kaunab had a battle with who? With Tsikwab or Tikwab. This is what people call Tiko these days. Tiko also in some stories actually was a human being. Just like Nkulunkulu was a human being in some stories. Was the most ancient of our ancestors in some of our oral histories. I'm not talking about books now or religion. I'm talking about oral accounts. In our oral accounts, Tiko was an actual man who used to live. Just like Nkulunkulu was an actual man who used to live. Now it has become now this entity that is like far-fetched and detached from us. Now I'm not debating religious stuff here. So Tikwab was this entity who was once challenged by the evil one, Kaunab. The evil one, Kaunab. Now the name Kaunab is the messenger, means the one of death, the representative of death. Kaunab. Remove the click, codify it. It's Aunab. You remove the click, you codify the name, it gives you Aunab, aka Anub, aka Anubis, the messenger of death, which I mentioned earlier today is usually represented by a dog or a jackal. Why is it represented by a jackal? A jackal eats what is already dead. Jackal is not a hunter. It's a scavenger. Why is it represented by a dog? A dog is a companion. It's a companion. So it will shapeshift between Set and Anubis. Set and Anubis. So what you get now is Kaunab ends up fighting, engaging in a battle with Tsikwab. These are personifications, and yes, they did manifest in the physical sense. They had to be able to manifest. Remember now, we have an entire industry of the manipulation of powers and energies. We have an entire industry of manipulating energies. We call it Gri, Ubuqi. We have an entire industry that is dedicated to manipulating these things. So yes, these things did manifest at some point in the physical. You see this is called Heka. This is the personification of Ubuqi. This is a personification of the healing power. Personification of magic. Heka or Heka or Kricha. This is Heka, the personification of that profession. So we were able to manipulate these things. That's why even to this day, people are able to create their own little demonic stuff. This entity on the head, you can't see it now, unfortunately. He has a crown called Hem crown. Back to Kaunab and Tsikwab. Kaunab, the evil one, tries to trick Tsikwab to a battle. Tsikwab fights with Kaunab to defend the people. Now they make a deal that if Kaunab wins, Kaunab is going to claim all forms of life. All forms of life, alive and dead alike, Kaunab is going to own them. Which means even if you die, you're still owned by Kaunab. Now, Twigwab was like, okay, but if I win, you let my people go. You don't take them, which means death is going to pass them over. So you see, again, this is another story centered around life and death. It's another story centered around life and death. It's Gauna, which means evil. Ukungcola. Gaunab. Usokungcola, the one of evil. It's Tsuni Gwab. Or Tsuni or Tsui, which means a painful, and Gwa, a knee. Tsuni Gwab, the one with a painful knee. Or with a broken knee. So Gaunab and Tsuni Gwab engage in a battle. Tsui Gwab ends up winning. But and as Gaunab is about to take his last breath, he strikes Tsui Gwab heavily on the knees, breaks one of the knees. That's one of the stories. The other stories, Gaunab doesn't actually die. He just surrenders. But he strikes Tsui Gwab on the leg still. It results in Tsui Gwab, who's originally called Kang, or Kru, or Kru Aumata, or Keng Akeng Teng. These are the real names. The name Tsui Gwab is not a real name. It's an alias. And I'll tell you how it comes about. So Gaunab strikes this man, who's the leader of these people. This man ends up with one leg. The other one is not working. So he ends up limping when he walks. And therefore he gets the name Gaunab, Tsuni Gwab, which means the limping one, or the wounded knee, or the one-legged entity. Umlenze ngamunye, or mulente ngamunye, or mlenze munye. The one with one leg. Now, in isiXhosa, a person who walks by limping, we say uyajinga or uyajingela. And someone who's been caused to walk by limping, we can call that person ijingwa, because they've been caused to walk in the form of ukuthi jinga. So ijingwa is the one who's been caused to limp, aka the one with a broken leg or knee. Lijingwa. So Tsui Gwab is the word in isiXhosa called jingwa. Umntu ojingelayo. Hence you get the name Thixo. It literally means the wounded knee, or the one-legged one. It's a alias of the original entity called Kang, or Keng, or Kru, or Keng Akeng Teng, or Kru Aumata. These are all the names of the highest entity who's revered as the one from whom life came. It's called Kang in some languages, Kang in other languages. In isiXhosa, it's called Amata. Some say Umveli Kangi, hence Kang. Exactly. In this ancient Lesotho back in the day, you would have the people such as the Khoi, that would call him Keng Akeng Teng. Now, Keng also is used to mean a king. Akeng Teng, of all things. Kru Aumata, the chief lord, or the rich lord of all things, Amata. Or the one who came first and is standing forever, Usmagade. So, Usmagade has a nickname called Thixo because there was a battle where he was struck in the leg, and therefore, wahamba ngomlenze munye. Now, some stories tell you that Usmagade, or Umveli Ngangi, or Umlenze Munye, or Kang ended up recovering from that leg. This is the second story where the word Thixo comes about. I want you to go and check the whole story of being struck in the leg. It sounds very similar to another story I once heard of someone being struck in the heel. Just like the other story I mentioned previously of us crossing emhlangeni. When we say siphume emhlangeni, we crossed by the reeds. That's what it tells you. Haitseb, as being revered by the Nama Gwab speakers and the Kwego Gwab speakers, led the people across the waters by calling out for Gamab, the water one. This is what we talk about, Kasiti, Elhlangeni, Umhlang. It's natural elements. Now, this is a second story. So, these stories are not just some empty stories that our ancestors thought about, and they're like, oh no, let's just tell these kids, they're not going to be able to understand what this is about. This is a way of keeping history alive. Oral history. And this is also how the Europeans, came to replace our way of doing things with their own version of oral history. They're naming our days for us as if we didn't have names for them. They will tell you about Monday as if we did not have a name for that. They tell you about Tuesday as if we didn't have a name for that. But these names they use are also based on what? They're based on lunar and solar entities. Monday is named after the moon. Tuesday is named after planet Mars. Wednesday is named after Mercury. You understand? You have Sunday, which is named after the sun. All the 7 days, it's 5 planets, the sun and the moon, which is 7. That's why you get 7 days. It's a mimicking of the 5 planets. You have Mars, you've got Mercury, you've got Jupiter, you've got Saturn, which is Saturday, I think Uranus. These 5 planets, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, I think Uranus. Oh, no, it's Venus actually. It's Venus. These 5 planets, and then add the sun, and then add the moon, is what give you the 7 days. So when they name these 7 days, they are naming them based on these cosmic entities, the planets, which the planets themselves are further personified. They are further personified. Mars, because it has a red color, it's personified as the war entity. Jupiter, personified as the sky father. Even the name Jupiter is literally Jew for sky, Peter for father, pater, father. Jupiter or Deus Pater, sky father. Mars, the fighting one. The fighting one. So we already had names, Tina, of our own doing. We already had names. It's true. If you flip the M in Mars, you play around with the words. If you flip the M in Mars, it gives you war. That is Mars. That is Mars. And that is Tuesday. And then we have Thursday, which is Jupiter, literally. Thursday, it's Jupiter. It's equivalent to Jupiter. It's named after Thor or Thor or Thor, which is thunder. But also Jupiter, because thunder is dependent on the sky. And the sky always represents the highest deity. Sky father, Jupiter. And this is the origin of the 7 days of the week. This is also why 7 is seen as a number of completion of. People think 7 is a number of perfection. But there's no such a thing here. I'm not saying 7 is not significant. I'm sure it is significant somewhere. Like all other numbers are significant somewhere. But we have to stop now mimicking their ways of looking at things. We have our own original ways. And if we don't preserve them, we lose them. If we don't preserve them, we lose them. So, you will see then, a lot of the times in these ancient, cultural symbols, you will realize that the cow is going to feature a lot. The cow is going to feature a lot. You see here, if you look on the top right, you will see a woman's face with horns. You'll see a woman's face with horns. That is the mother, the cow goddess, called Bat. Bat is a cow goddess. Ba means essence. Ba means essence. Ukuba. Huba. Huba mutu. The essence of being. Huba mutu. Huba or Khaba. The soul. But is represented as the cow goddess. Why would a cow represent the soul? Why would the cow represent the soul? Think about the Milky Way as a cosmic body that represents a trail in the sky. It's called the Milky Way because they felt like it resembled a pool of cow's milk. So the reference to cows and milk is because as above, so below. So what is seen above can be represented with what is seen below. The horns of the cow themselves, if you look around them and you place a disc, it will represent an eclipse. I don't have a picture of a cow yet. The horns of the cow themselves, you place a disc around the horns, it represents an eclipse. An alignment of cosmic bodies. So all these are physical representations of forces. Physical representations of forces. What you see here is Geb and Nut. I don't have a better picture, unfortunately. Geb and Nut. Geb is the one at the bottom. From the word Gaib, from Gub, Umquba, or Umhlaba, Geb, Umhlaba. The physical. And you have Nut, or Nyet, Unyeti, or Unyezi, the skies of the night. You have the physical earth, and on top of the physical earth, you have the sky of the night, also physically represented. Every single element of everyday life can be represented. Do you know why when they try to preserve history, they use personification? Because when you personify, it's easy to remember. It's very easy to remember something that's been personified. It's the easiest to remember. So you get all this. Just give me a sec. This thing wants me to confirm something here. It's very important to understand. So when we learn about our mythology, then the stories in our mythology, it's not just stories, hopeless stories. It's not just stories because our people were these primitive creatures who didn't know what they were talking about. No! They had to find ways to represent nature. So go back to the stories you were told as a child, please. Go back to the stories you were told as a child. You will see something you never saw before. When they tell you that there's a cow that is speaking, a cow that is fighting and overcoming something, trust me, you will see something you never saw before. Because that cow represents a king. But a king itself represents a supernatural being. You understand? That's why some of the Near East people refer to king as Melek. You know, Melek means worker. Mereki, hubereka, mereki. It's a worker, Melek. But not a worker in the sense of a laborer, but rather a worker in the sense of a representative of a higher being. That's what a king is. That's why kings are not chosen, but their bloodline. They are representative of something bigger. An order. A metaphysical order. I'm not going to go any further for tonight. I wanted to just touch on these things. We're going to go even deeper, my people. We're going to go even deeper. I want us to go deep because we need to talk about certain things like Amantindala, certain things like Chitaur, certain things like Anunnaki. We must talk about these things, what they are and what they mean to us, and whether we have these things in our oral history. We must talk about whether we have these things in our oral history and what do we think the universe is in our oral accounts. You will be shocked what our understanding of the universe is. Some scientists are not even close. Thank you, observer. Thank you. Some scientists are not even close. I'm going to drop it now, my people. I thank everyone who joined. I thank everyone who joined. I'm gonna host another live probably tomorrow. It's a bit late for me now. We're gonna talk more about these things. I'm gonna come up with more stories and better pictures. I know my pictures suck. And better lighting because my lighting is bad today. And we'll go deeper. Thank you very much. I appreciate all of you guys. Ivula Maine. That's how my people say it in Lesotho and in Eastern Cape. Ivula Maine. Vutemalagabi. It's me, my people, Sandile. Giguyo siyaziye wakatfugani. Gilithetsa, giliphetla, gilivuladlela. Agitalwa kufati. Ngithewukiye elitulwini. Ngatokotsi dzidzinini eliphasini. Ngikufene mina ngilicazi usanzanza. Ngikuwake ehlathini, lihlathi lelikothiwa nselivutha. Lothiwa itifene tozi kuba yito ebanyinyilo. Mina ke ngikumphuthi bekhethu. Ngikumuthi wokuhwala emgodlini, ngikumuthi wokugiqa emajwe. Ngikumuthi wokupheka tiphemphem ngenqawana, wokupheka tiqhakuba ngenqawana. Ndinguluncu mna ndingumwandla, ndingumandi wafikela uhlangeni. Ndingumfene zabelo bafokazi. Ndingumfene ezimabutho ahlukana xa kutshona ilanga. Amaku.